Hello again. I'm Rob Kantner with Kantner & Company Incorporated, bringing you another ISO Snapshot. Thought I'd start by waving the book. Wrote a book on ISO 9000 a few years ago, and I'm told that in these videos that we're doing, that for credibility reasons, I should wave the book, so consider it waived. Today's topic, picking your ISO coordinator. Now, in thinking about this, I was reminded of a time 15 years ago or so when I first went out on my own helping companies implement ISO 9000 systems. And I had one of my earliest jobs was in Georgia, and it was with a company where when I got there, they introduced me to the gentleman who was going to be their ISO coordinator. And they mentioned kind of offhand that this was his first day on the job also. Well, folks, it was a disaster. I mean, you know, the guy worked hard, he did the best he could, but he was brand new to the company, he was brand new on the job, he didn't have a whole lot of credibility, and after about 2 months of frankly wasted wheel spinning, they had to pull him off the ISO project and put him on something else. So that was kind of my first experience with that kind of situation and the beginning of my education in how important it is to pick the right person to be the ISO coordinator. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to talk a little bit about the criteria for being the ISO coordinator and also some items about the duties that they have. As it happens, 9001, 14001, and 18001 all mention the role of ISO coordinator. ISO 9001, for example, calls that person the management representative. And in paragraph 5.5.2, there's a rule for who can be the management representative. And that rule is this: he or she must be an employee of the company as a member of management. That's it. That's all it has to say about it. Which is enough in and of itself, except that over the past 15 years, as I mentioned, we've learned that there's a lot more criteria for being a successful management representative. And let's talk about what those criteria are now. So what are the criteria for being an effective ISO coordinator anyway? Well, I count 6 of them. Number 1, the MR should have seniority in the company. Remember the situation I told you about at the outset with a newbie? Please don't repeat that mistake. Take it from me. Number 2, the MR must have top management support, and I mean real top management support, not just lip service. When an ISO implementation doesn't go well, when it drags behind, or when an ISO process is not as effective as we want it to be, the root cause of that is almost always traceable to lack of top management support. Number 3, the MR should know his or her way around the key processes of the business, the key managers, the key employees. Have some familiarity with all of these areas. Number 5, the MR should be team-oriented and skilled at getting people to work together. And finally, number 6, an effective MR is a glutton for punishment. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Let's just say he or she needs to be thick-skinned, persistent, and really good at nagging people. So those are the criteria for being the management representative. But once you've picked a management representative, what is the job of that person going to be anyway? What the heck are we getting ourselves into, is the big question. Well, first of all, in the run-up to certification, the MR is instrumental in the setup of the system and getting it documented and getting the training done and getting the implementation done and seeing to it that the process moves along. The MR is also going to be responsible for what we call document control. Any ISO system is built around a set of documents, hopefully as lean a set as possible. But the point is that the MR is responsible for seeing to it that these documents are developed and approved and that the correct documents are available to the correct people as needed. The MR is also responsible for some of the ISO system support processes, such as corrective action, which is an internal problem-solving process, getting that up and running. The MR runs the internal audit process by which we monitor how well the system is being implemented as that process goes along. And the MR is also involved heavily in the performance metrics, the data gathering, the reporting, and the analysis. Then there's management review, a process where top management periodically reviews the state of the management system, the MR coordinates that effort, generally is the one to set the agenda, generally is the one to keep the records, and to make sure that action items coming out of management review are taken care of. But what happens after certification, after you get that flag? What happens to the MR position after that? Well, the typical MR continues to have duties in all the areas that we just talked about. In addition to that, the MR becomes the point of contact person with the certification body, and therefore the MR is involved in dealing with the surveillance assessments that come along every 6 months or so. But normally, if the system is well developed and well managed, the work of the MR, the pace of the work that the MR has to do drops considerably. So that leads us to the most commonly asked question about the MR position. Is it a full-time job? And my answer to that is emphatically no. The job should never be a full-time job, except possibly during the run-up to certification, during the crunch time that we talked about. It can get pretty hectic then. But after certification, with the pace of work dropping and with people sharing responsibility for the system up and down the line, I believe that the MR position should be half-time at the most, and hopefully even less. Down through the years, I've worked with hundreds of MRs. All different kinds of folks in all different kinds of situations. But they all have certain things in common. For one thing, and we have to be frank about it, most of them have found the job to be stressful, demanding, and occasionally thankless. Let's face it, it can be a real challenge getting an ISO system implemented. But I have to say that there's a flip side to it, and that is that many of the MRs I've worked with have found the experience to be a learning experience and a growth experience and a fulfilling way to help their companies improve. So I hope that when you embark on the ISO journey, or when you find yourself needing to replace your existing ISO coordinator or MR, that the guidelines we've talked about today will be helpful. That's it for today. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Kantner. Talk to you again soon. Get ready for the book wave. Whoop!